Hi guys, today we're gonna talk about how to assess speaking for anyone who's teaching English as a foreign language or as a second language. That is a very that's a very important lesson to you because after all, a lot of people, let's say for example, are gonna depend on one way or another without knowing what kind of assessment he or she is involved in. In order to assess your students' performance in English as a foreign language or even as a second language, you need to keep in mind what kind of skill you are assessing and what is a more practical way of doing that. Just asking people a bunch of questions does not mean that you know exactly where are they. Because what I have seen in many contexts, formal or informal context, especially when it comes to placing students in a certain level. So a lot of people would design a set of questions, just like interviewing people. And based on this, I don't know, without having any rubric or without having any clear measurements of how to do this, they are going to put them in a level which has nothing to do with their own competence or performance in the language. So, long story short, how can we do that? So, one easy way of doing this is to understand the speaking skill. First of all, speaking skill is one of the most important skills in learning any language, not only English. But the problem of assessing speaking is that it cannot be done purely, just like writing, for example. In speaking, you are at the same time you are assessing vocabs, grammar, and even other skills. So, how can we design a pure speaking exam that is quite challenging? So, in this mind map, I tried to make it easier for you to understand what I'm talking about. So, it's here, zoom it out to make it easier. When it comes to assessing speaking, you need to keep in mind that we have two main subcategories of speaking skills. One is the micro part, and the other is the macro. The micro part has to do with sounds. So, does the person you are interviewing able to produce English sounds without, for example, mixing them up, like, for example, P and B, or L and L, or even T and T, and again, aspirated, non aspirated, allophonic, non allophonic sounds. And even when it comes to using words for reduction or cohesive, in an appropriate way according to the rules of the target language. In this case, it's English. And even is he or she able to understand the reduced forms of words? Like, for example, wanna, gonna, or let's say, is he playing? Is he, or do you mean is he playing, or does he playing? Which one is correct? And then word stress, of course, and intonation in the sentence. So instead of saying, do you want this? Do you want this? So again, we have different meaning. That would be the micro level, which at the word level, phrase level, or sentential level, the sentence level, like linking sentences, linking words, or even word stress, or producing sounds. So instead of, for example, saying the difference between, let's say, for example, bit and beat. So here they are minimal pairs. So in this case, your students must be able to differentiate between both of them. And the other level that you need to keep in mind is the micro one. And in this micro one, you are targeting the student's performance in accomplishing communicative function. And in communicative function, one of them, let's say, for example, able to understand and answer questions, able to perform communicative function using the language. Let's say, for example, if I'm asking him to express his own feeling, if I'm asking him to do something for me, He understands what I'm saying, and he's able to respond appropriately according to the function involved in the task. And also using the appropriate register, the style of speaking. So let's say, for example, if we are working in a school, if we are at home, if we are in an interview register, so you keep all of this in mind. And most importantly, able to understand the implied meaning, not the service meaning, not the explicit meaning. So I remember, for example, let's say, for example, today I was saying something and my American friend said, right on the nose. And my Chinese friend was confused. What does it mean to be right in the nose? Is this something right, something wrong, or is it embarrassing? But when you are saying right in the nose, you just say it is exactly true. I totally agree. So you understand idioms, you understand proverbs, all of this kind of skills that you need to be equipped with to pass a certain level or to be placed in a certain level according to your own competence, knowledge of the language, and performance in that language. Without further ado, let's go to the types of speaking skills, or how can we assess speaking. So here I summed up all the different types of speaking. So one way of assessing your students' performance, let's say I have a students, one way of doing this, it is using some imitative speaking skills. Like for example, asking them to repeat certain words to make sure that he understands the sounds, he is able to produce correct sounds, he is not mixing up sounds with each other, especially challenging sounds like F and V or B and B. And let's say, for example, other sounds that are quite challenging to any speaker with the same linguistic background. And also, we have another test that's going on, Versant, which is a well-known test. It is based on repeating after a machine. It's a computerized test. So what is so interesting about this exam, we have a bunch of sentences and we're asking the test taker or the students to repeat after a machine, and the machine is evaluating and also is giving some kind of rate or ratio of his or her own performance. That is the easiest way, imitative tasks. Another way of assessing people as speaking skill is by doing intensive speaking tasks. Like, for example, directed response, like tell me, for example, that he went home, or tell me what time he went home. Or you're gonna again provide a passage, a paragraph, a bunch of sentences, and you're gonna ask your test taker or the students in this case to read out loud, to pay attention to, again, linking words, and again, pauses in sentences, intonation, word stress, and even, again, the way he is producing chunks, big chunks of words in a sentence or in a phrase. And another way of doing this is a sentence dialogue completion. So you are providing him with a bunch of sentences with some words taking out, and in this case, you are asking them to complete them, missing words. Or maybe, let's say, for example, you are going to say something, you're going to ask them to fill out a form based on your, again, the prompt you provided him with it. And a fourth way of doing intensive task is to provide them with a picture and ask them, for example, to describe a picture or to compare two pictures, or again, to find some element for you in the picture. Let's say, for example, is he doing this in this? Look at this picture, at this guy playing tennis or football. Which one of them, if we have names, let's, for example, say Jacob, we have the other one, Leo, the third one, we have James. And in this case, you're saying, is James here doing tennis, yes or no? Or is Jacob here is writing an essay for the class, yes or no? And then a simple way of doing intensive task is ask students to, again, asking students to translate one or two sentences for you. It's partial translation. It's not, again, a big chunk of words or sentences or a text, but just one or two sentences to be able to, again, make sure that he understands where's the subject, where's the verb, and again, when the action is happening, let's say in the past, present, or future. Then we can use the responsive kind of tasks. And in this case, it depends basically one of them. For example, you can come up with a Q&A, question and answer. Like, for example, when did you choose? Why did you choose your major? If he is majoring, let's say, in commerce or in, let's say, psychology, sociology, pharmacy, and all of this kind of such kind of thing. And in this case, you're asking them to provide some responsive, again, production, and in this case you are able to evaluate their performance. Or you're going to provide them with the map, and in this case you're asking them for instructions. So where can I go to the bank from here? So for example, you are in this point, in this spot, in this place, and you're going to ask them to give you a direction to go to a certain place. Or you're going to provide them, let's say, for example, with a story, and you're telling them to paraphrase, use their own words to, again, convey the same message stated in this prompt. A fourth way of assessing students' performance is to, again, use some interactive tasks. Like, let's say, for example, interviewing. And one of the most certified ways of doing that is OPI, the Oral Proficiency Interview. And it has 4 parts, sections, whatever. And in the first part, you're just trying to make them feel relaxed and confident by asking them some warm-up question. They are not graded. Question like, okay, tell me more about your day. How was your day? Again, or how about the weather like today? Or something like, how many brother and sister do you have? Just warming up question. Or do you play tennis, or such kind of thing? And then you move on to the second part, which is level check. In this case, you're asking him some question to see exactly where is he or she when it comes to language proficiency and accuracy, fluency when it comes to, again, speaking and understanding the language, and again, producing some chunks of in this language. And the next step would be probing, challenging him with some other question to see, for example, is he B1 or B2 or BC1, let's say. And finally, you are going to wind down and, again, asking him, do you have any question for me? Or you're telling them you're going to hear back from me about your results in a week or two or in this day, and such kind of thing. And another way of doing this, you're going to play, let's say, for example, a scenario, role playing. So in this case, let's say, for example, you as an examiner are going to tell them, I will play the teacher role and you will be students. I'm going to ask you a question and you're going to respond. Or phone calls. Let's say, for example, you do have a problem with your credit card and you're contacting the bank to find out what's going on. You have a big issue with that and you need to fix it. Someone needs to, again, to be taking care of your problem. Or some kind of discussion, conversation thing. Any topic you're going to ask and answer in a long, again, kind of linguistic exchange. And then games, that would be another thing, and puzzles, that would be word puzzles, for example. And another test that usually provides some computerized way of assessing students' performance based on the interactive skills is the ACTAL or ACTAL. Just like the OPI, but just like another version of doing that. The last, again, challenging skill of doing this is the extensive tasks. And the extensive tasks are, for example, more challenging to students. And in this case, you are placing him a little bit higher. So, for example, it's a monologue. One of them is doing the monologue thing by asking them to give a presentation on a topic. Let's say, for example, any topic, climate change or presidency in a certain country, or again, preparing a favorite dish of a certain country, or the dress code, the tradition, cultural tradition of a certain community. And or you can use, again, the picture cued one we used earlier, but with some challenge. Like, for example, grouping a bunch of pictures together and asking them, students again, to tell the story and asking them some follow-up questions. Or you asking them to retell a story they read about it, or to report what happened in the news. Let's say, for example, we have a shooting in a nearby school, and they're asking them, okay, could you please tell me what happened? Are you familiar with this topic? Yes. Could you please tell me what happened? Again, now you're again activating his schema about the event, and also at the same time, you're paying attention to his micro and macro skills when it comes to speaking. And one last thing is, again, to challenge them with some kind of translation prose. In this case, you're giving them 2 or 3 paragraphs, and you're going to ask them to produce a good translation according to the the source or target language. So again, assessing people's speaking skill is not easy, it's challenging. That's why one easy way of doing that is to keep these two skills in mind, micro and macro, and the different tasks that you can use to do that. That's all I have for now. And again, feel free to write down any comments you have on the comment box below. Thank you, guys. And again, if you have any question, let me know. Put it up there. And again, in a second, maybe the next video, I'm going to talk about how to assess listening skills for students. Bye.